We're so excited to have our Attorney General here today, and I'm grateful to the Chief of Police for hosting us. I hope you all had a chance to look at the guns that have been confiscated here in the city of San Diego. So we're looking forward to a robust discussion about what we're doing in San Diego to prevent gun violence. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of who's around the table, we have Assistant City Attorney John Hemmerling. He is with my office and runs our criminal division. We have our Chief Deputy City Attorney Nicole Crosby, and I will turn to the Attorney General to introduce his staff.
John Marsh from the Division of Law Enforcement, our Acting Chief.
And of course we have the Attorney General. I'm Mara Elliott. I'm the City Attorney for San Diego. We have Chief Nislight, and we have Lieutenant Radassa, who was newly promoted to run our Family Justice Center here in San Diego, but also was on our Gun Violence Response Unit team for a long time. So around the table, you've got a lot of expertise. I am extremely grateful to our Chief of Police for all he has done to really keep San Diego safe. These types of programs can never go forward without having a collaboration of public safety officials who are really willing to put their efforts into starting a program from scratch and helping it grow. And of course, it is our absolute honor to have our Attorney General here, who has made no secret of the fact that he is very interested in preventing gun violence in the state of California. So we're honored to have him here so he can learn a little bit more about what we're doing in San Diego. And for those of you who are following things, you know that keeping our region safe is not good enough for the city of San Diego. And with the assistance of the state of California, we have been able to do a roadshow and train organizations throughout the state of California so that they can replicate the model that we have created here in San Diego. And as I mentioned, Lieutenant Radassa was part of that initial team. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Chief of Police, David Nislight.
Thank you, Mara. First, I want to say thank you for all being here, and I want to welcome both the City Attorney Mara Elliott and the Attorney General Rob Bonta to Police Headquarters. It's a really big deal that they're both here. And I also want to thank the Attorney General for really his interest in seeing what this program is all about here in San Diego. You know, I really want to showcase the partnership, because it is a partnership between the San Diego Police Department and really our City Attorney's Office and the courts to really remove firearms from those that might harm themselves, their loved ones, or the public. So it is a very important proactive tool that we use the Gun Violence Restraining Order program to remove firearms for that. It's really not the goal of removing firearms from people, but the goal is removing firearms from people who wish to use firearms to do harm to those. So with that, I'll turn that back over to Mara.
Thank you, Chief. And we'll now hear from our Attorney General for some opening remarks, and then we'll get to the juice of it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General, really excited to be here in San Diego. Thank you to Chief Nislight for hosting and sharing more about the GVRO program. Thank you to City Attorney Elliott for your friendship and your partnership, and truly your national and statewide leadership on this issue. And, you know, we are seeing rising levels of gun violence. We know that there were increases and spikes in purchases of guns during the pandemic. And we know that everyone deserves to be safe in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, in their workplaces, in their places of worship. And unfortunately, too often and too many times, we have seen tragic and horrific examples where that is not the case. But if we can do something that is common sense and lawful and constitutional to keep people safe, we should. We ought to. And red flag laws are something that is just highly effective in preventing gun violence from happening in the first place. And San Diego is really the epicenter of GVROs working, red flag laws working to keep people safe. And so I've come to learn that there's not that many brand new ideas. There's just ideas that are good ideas that haven't been used in more places yet. And if San Diego, as it has been leading the way, is keeping people safe, saving lives, and others have not yet taken advantage of that opportunity, we ought to scale that model. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about the model today, what has been effective about it. I know that collaboration has been key between the courts, between the police department, between the city attorney's office, and I come in that same spirit of collaboration to listen and to learn and to help use what San Diego has done so effectively to help more Californians throughout the state. So looking forward to the conversation, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Attorney General. So this has been a program that San Diego started in December of 2017. And I was just explaining to you where the epiphany came from. I was dropping off my kindergartner and second grader in school on the day that Sandy Hook was announced. And I think for most parents, when we drop our children off at school, we believe that they're going to be safe. So for me, it rocked my world. And I remember getting very involved in the security plans of the school. Actually got on the committee and made sure that all the doors were properly secured, but it wasn't enough. And then I think the second thing that really made me think we've got to do more is what happened at UC Santa Barbara, and that's my alma mater. And again, where all of the flags were present. That's where red flag law comes from. The flags were there, and this individual still could not be stopped because the way the law worked in California is that we had to wait for a criminal activity to occur before we could act. So we could see all of the signs and not do anything. But after UC Santa Barbara, the state legislature enacted a law called gun violence restraining orders, and that allows us to do something when the signs are present that somebody is a danger to themselves or they're a danger to others. And it has been, as the chief will say, a game changer. Those are his words, and I agree. These programs are not difficult to start. And we certainly didn't know that we could do so much at the local level. And in my mind, it was always this thought that, well, that's a federal issue, gun control is, but and gun prevention of violence. But you can do something at the local level. So we have been using GVROs effectively for the last 3 years. And you saw an example of some of the guns that have been taken off of the streets of San Diego. These cases come to us from people who are working in employment situations where somebody is making statements that perhaps are going to shoot up their workplace. We will see social media postings from children that are going to school and they're threatening to kill their classmates. Of course, we see our fair share of intimate partner violence and family violence. The pandemic was notable because a lot of people were on edge, and we saw an uptick in suicide threats. And with the ability of the courts, and of course we have to prove our case, so it's not just somebody is saying someone is dangerous. We have to have evidence, and we have to convince a judge with the assistance of our officers who help us gather that evidence that there is a reason for a gun violence restraining order to be issued. And once we have that order, we can take away the guns and allow what's called a cooling off period. It is not a permanent removal, but it is a crisis intervention. So we want to make sure that somebody who's going through some type of a crisis has an opportunity to get through it. So if they had a relationship bust up, they can move on. If they are, if they're suffering from PTSD, and we see our fair share of that, we are a military town. Somebody could access services and work on that issue. Once they are in an ability to, they have the ability to again be a responsible gun owner or gun user, they get their guns back. So it allows that cooling off period, and it's been remarkably successful. And it's not just because of the trifecta you heard about, the courts, the chief and his team, our office. It's because the community now knows what to do when they get information, so they know who to call. Before these laws were in effect, we could come into knowledge of potentially harmful situations and not know what to do with that information. Now we know what to do, and that's why we're so grateful to our media partners for getting the word out about these programs, because it helps us save lives. So, Chief, did you want to add anything, or Ricky?
Yeah, you pretty much touched it. Right after the red flag, I think it was late 2016 or so. I'd only been an assistant chief for a very short time at that time when this program was brought to my desk from one of your prosecutors, and I was in 100% as a patrol chief at the time. I truly saw this, to your point, as a great tool to remove firearms from those who are either going to harm themselves or somebody else. And so it's really a proactive tool, and that's really what our job is to make certain that we use every single tool available to us to remove the firearm before somebody gets hurt. And before, as you pointed out, sometimes there wasn't something that could fill that gap to allow us to do that. This is that gap filler, if you will.
Absolutely.
And it allows us to be proactive, to your point, to go out and get the facts, present those facts to your office and the courts, and then get that GVRO granted, and then remove those firearms from that person. So it's been, I will say, it has been a game changer. It's a very important tool. It's so important that we obviously have one of our detectives embedded in your unit over at your office, because that's how much I believe in it, to actually give you a full-time staff member of San Diego PD to make certain that we're doing everything we can to keep our community safe.
Yeah, and I'll add to the chief's point. So he, as he mentioned, he was an assistant chief at the time that we started this program with his predecessor. And I remember Chief Zimmerman saying it's not just about the community, it's also about keeping our officers safe, because the officers could return with stories that perhaps nothing happened that day, but they knew something was bound to happen. So it also helps us keep law enforcement safe. And we're extremely grateful that Zimmerman was on board. Now we've got Chief Nislight, and having someone embedded in our office has been phenomenal. I have to give a shout out, of course, to our court system. So this is a trifecta of services. The first time that we ever filed a gun violence restraining order, the court didn't know what to do with it. They'd never seen one before. So we sent the attorney down to the business office, and he walked them through it. We trained all the judges, and they were 100% on board. During the pandemic, we didn't miss a beat. So we were able to virtually appear and get those gun violence restraining orders, and I believe also appear in person throughout, correct, John? So we didn't miss a beat on that, but that's also because our court system here takes everybody's safety and security extremely seriously. So definitely a program that can be replicated throughout the state, and I have to thank the Attorney General for all of his support. We've had tremendous support from Assemblymember Ting up in the Bay Area. I remember mentioning to him a couple years ago, sort of in joking, but also with some hope, that if he would give us a small allocation, we'd be willing to get a cheap hotel room and a Southwest ticket and fly anywhere and train people. Well, about a day or two later, Assemblymember Ting's office called us and said, hey, check out the budget, there's a line item in it. So that's how it began for us, and then the allocation went to $250,000, and then it went up to $1 million, which is going to help us sustain our efforts for the next 3 years. And we are extremely grateful to the Attorney General and to the Governor for all of their support, and of course Phil Ting, who's just a rock star in this area.
Wonderful.
Have we answered all your questions, or I'm sure you have some more?
So it sounds like there was some education that had to be done, some awareness that had to be raised, literally walking over and sitting down with the judges and educating on the tools. So I feel like the concept is something that a lot of folks understand, but the implementation, the details, if there's an educator or a family member or a colleague in the workplace who sees something, and how do they know what the next step is? Who do they call? What do they do? And then how do we make that so it's kind of instinctive and well known and habitual, as opposed to something that's inaccessible?
Yeah, that is a great question, and that's why having our community partners and media publicizing this effort is so important. The first step is to call the police department. Because they know how to do these investigations. They know whether it is a legitimate threat, which we're going to fully investigate before we take a GVRO forward. So we want to make sure we have a solid case, and that's why we work with law enforcement. The law does allow an individual to get their own gun violence restraining orders, but again, we recommend using law enforcement to ensure everybody's safety. They know how to take a gun from somebody without getting harmed. So we would always encourage that. In terms of getting information out, we made a very determined effort to reach as many folks as we could, particularly Second Amendment right gun groups, to explain to them what we were doing and to invite them to let us know if they had any concerns about our program. And said specifically, if you think we're overreaching, you let us know, and we will walk through that case with you. We want legitimacy in this program. We want people to trust and believe in it. And out of all the GVROs that we've had, hundreds, they've never yet contacted us to say you've overstepped. So that is, I think, essential communication, is letting people know this is what you do to start the process. And here is how you engage your public. So Nicole spends a great deal of time going to Kiwanis and Rotary and town councils and groups like that to talk about the program and what to do if you get this kind of information, because it's a very legitimate question, and government can be confusing when you're trying to figure out who to call.
Yes, it can.
Certainly can.
And if there was we're a city attorney's office that's saying, this is a space we haven't been in, but we want to be. We want to be part of the solution. We see the challenges of Californians, and we want to be more like the San Diego City Attorney's Office. What should they do? And are you training city attorneys
We are.
directly?
Yeah. We will go just about anywhere. Again, it's a Southwest ticket. And then nowadays, we can do this virtually. I don't think it's quite as impactful, but certainly we are available for virtual presentations. we have trained hundreds of organizations on this so far because it is not complicated. But I think anytime you're starting a new program, it does look like it is. And we just break it down into bite-sized pieces and help organizations create their own programs. So we do that initial training, we do refreshers, and we're also available for telephone calls. And again, that is handled through the allocation we've received through the state budget.
Wonderful. I've also noticed that most of the GVROs are sought by law enforcement, as opposed to some of the other eligible individuals, co-workers, educators, teachers, family members. Is that because those folks talk to law enforcement first, and then law enforcement takes it from there?
I would imagine so. That's the way it works here in San Diego. We would encourage any other jurisdiction to do the same thing. It demystifies the process. It's safer for those who are contacting. An individual could do it in pro per. They don't have to hire a lawyer, but the legal system's confusing for people. So we always encourage, go through your law enforcement office.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's such an invaluable tool. I mean, there's, from the law enforcement perspective, before this law was enacted, I don't know how many times where officers would respond to a scene and you leave there frustrated because it's like, you're going to go back there, whether it's a domestic violence where it didn't rise to the level of criminal, where you couldn't do anything, you walk away, we're going to have to go back there at some point.
Yeah.
It's not going to be pretty. So this gives us a proactive tool. It's an invaluable bipartisan tool that we're able to go out there and actually be proactive about it and save lives. And it really, on the ground level, as far as for officers, it's a tool that, it's not just a check the box tool, it's actually a tool that we're utilizing to protect people. So it is, has the ability to decrease the violent crime, and it also has the ability to save lives. Our officers, although at first, before we implemented it and started rolling it out, it was like everything, it's new, it's changed. So people are always going to be reluctant of some change.
Yes.
But once they start utilizing it, it's commonplace in Main Street now, so it's really nice.
I have to agree with what Ricky said, and it's important to note that when we see red flags and we see escalation of violence or a threat of violence, people are in crisis, and we don't want to ask school administrations or victims of domestic violence to be in the position to be the person to carry that torch. Law enforcement is here, for a reason in a non-civil capacity to proactively protect people. And when we are able to identify those flags and do something about it, so they don't have to, it really does make the situation a lot safer and smoother.
Yeah, and to both of those points too. The reason why I like the law enforcement touch first is we don't know how quickly that's going to escalate. And so I don't want to put a citizen in harm's way and all of a sudden then we have a violent incident. Let us respond and then find out the facts. And then to Ricky's point, to Nicole's point, we'll find out the facts. We'll determine whether we need to do a GVRO or if we need to do something different. But again, the whole goal is to prevent that violent act from occurring.
To your point, as far as implementing this, like if there's another city that wants to get involved in it, it's going to come down to becoming educated on the laws, becoming educated on how to facilitate, the acquisition of the GVROs, the follow through, and that's going to, it comes down with us. We have a name in San Diego because we have such a great partnership with the city attorney's office. I would recommend establishing those partnerships with their own city attorneys, getting educated from the group that's going around training, because they've been a resource. Not only do they do the initial training, but the follow-through questions that they're getting. I mean, countless phone calls and emails. Hey, can you walk me through? You have city attorneys calling their city attorney's office. Can you walk me through this exact, incident? And they've done it. And they've done it citywide. From people in San Francisco call, LA calls all the time. So it's been a great partnership, and I think it would be incumbent upon those particular cities to make that partnership, become educated, and then implement it. The implementation here at San Diego took some time. We ended up doing a lot of command training where we had to teach supervisors, and then we teach it throughout the entire city, so every officer's trained on it. Because it's such a big program, it does take some time, but in order to become mainstream, you have to stay on top of it.
Right.
So I think everybody knows that gun violence is one of the major issues in the country. I think everybody's on board, and it's a common sense tool that people need to get on board with. I think they are.
Yeah, and if I can just follow up on that, especially for you, Mr. Attorney General, whenever we do these trainings that Ricky's been to, Nicole's been to, currently the team is out right now doing training as well. Jeff Brooker and Justin Garlow, the detective, are doing some training right now at one of the cities. But we started off every single time about discussing how can you be successful in this. When you can be successful, I always mention Chief Nislight and Mara Elliott. They are big proponents of finding ways to prevent gun violence, and anything that can be done to do that. I always make this speech, and I say that collaboration starts at the top. And to be honest with you, if you, all you in this room, I'm talking usually officers and detectives, and some city staff, city attorney, deputy, things like that, say you can be as motivated as you want, but if you don't have support all the way up at the top, you're going to find yourself frustrated, and you're going to be doing things, and it's going to end up, kind of fizzling out because you don't get that support. I encourage you to go back there, try to get your senior management on board, because as soon as it comes from the top and goes down, then everybody else is on board. And that, again, thanks to Chief Nislight and Mara Elliott for the things that they've done. That is really the pattern that needs to be brought forward across the state. Get that to the very top to say, is gun violence important to you all or not? And if it is, then it should be from the very top, and then everybody down below understanding that's a priority. The chief's made it a priority because he's assigned a person to our gun violence response unit. The city attorney now has 6 staff members that work in that as well. It's a very important piece that needs to be put out there. And like I said, we can train as much as we can. I mean, police departments are required now, as of January 1st, to have policies and procedures in place that has several things that has to be in place for them to proactively put in gun violence restraining orders. So, and we're always available. If anybody calls us, any city attorney's office, any law enforcement, any health and human service agency, any mental health professional, we've taught many of those as well. We've been hosted by several county mental health organizations that also want the training too. So we're always very open to that. We'll go anywhere and do it. We take calls 24 hours a day. I know Jeff and Nicole and Ricky. I usually don't. I defer to them because that's how it goes, right? Boss. But we're always available. Like I said, 24 hours a day. I mean, they're getting calls in the middle of the night from some law enforcement officer in the middle of nowhere in California saying, I need to get an emergency protective order. How do I do this? I was at your training 4 months ago. I have to do this. And meanwhile, either Justin or Jeff or Ricky or somebody's like, oh, hold on a second. Let's have a wait here. I'll answer your question. So it's important, but I say the most important message that's taken away that we start every single training with is the collaboration starting at the very top. And once that's there and everybody understands that in the organization, it will get itself going and it'll work itself out.
And with that is letting law enforcement know that they can rely on their attorneys to help them through the process, right? We can only do what we're supposed to do. Government workers, we have our job and we're going to do our job. But, to ask someone to go into court and fend for themselves is not really a good way of doing business, right? So definitely having that partnership so they know that they can do their job and we can do our job and work together.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, guys. As she said, we usually say, we're good at going to court and standing up there and talking to a judge, but as the attorneys, we're not good at going down there and taking guns at people. There's people who are experts. That's called law enforcement and the police. They're experts at that. Let them do their lane, and we'll stay in our lane. When we work together, it's going to be great.
All right. Well, I appreciate all of the input from the experts on the issue. So, Attorney General, I think that brings us to pretty much the end of our roundtable. I will just throw in one more thing before I turn it over to you. John and Nicole mentioned the partnership aspect, and we work with the school districts so that they know who to call. We work with the county so we can train their social workers, their mental health professionals. We are reaching out to as many individuals as we can to talk about the program and how they fit into it and who to call if and when the time comes. And I think that's been the key to our success, not just having excellent partners like we do in San Diego, but also making sure that people know about us and what we're trying to achieve. So again, we appreciate you spending some time in San Diego. We're excited about partnering with you. We are watching the laws to see where changes may be needed. We are, like John said, lawyers, so we try to figure out what the data means. So we are happy to share whatever expertise we may have with you.
Thank you.
So again, thank you, and I'll turn it over to you for a close.
Yeah, well, my huge appreciation here, and I just can't thank San Diego enough for demonstrating a model that others can use through the prioritization, the collaboration, the execution. And, the data speaks for itself. 37% of the GVROs that have been issued in the state have come right out of San Diego. And sometimes it's hard to measure the lives saved or the harm prevented from prevention measures because they never happen in the first place. But just look over at that table. You can see examples. There are some very poignant examples of folks who were, on the verge of hurting others that we know we prevented because of the implementation of these red flag laws. And, so often after a tragic, horrific mass shooting, we hear interviews of family members or coworkers or folks who know the person, and they say often, this is not a total surprise to me. I saw something that was off. I saw something that was wrong. And if that person was empowered and had the education and awareness and had a great gun violence restraining order program like San Diego has, maybe that could have prevented one of those tragic mass shootings. And if we can prevent those, we should. So this is a wonderful, effective example of violence intervention, of violence prevention. And, I share City Attorney Elliott's views as a parent of three. I got elected to the California State Legislature in November of 2012, and then that December was Newtown. And for everyone who's a parent, that hit us hard. And I had the same feeling, looking at my school and saying, there's no fence around this school. Anyone can enter at any time. Are my kids safe? I've had my children in lockdowns. They've done live shooter drills. They shouldn't have to do that. And we can do more as adults, as leaders. And this is an example of something that has worked, that can work in more places if we implement it in more places. So I appreciate the model and the leadership that's being demonstrated here in San Diego, and look forward to working with you to scale up the program and improve it as it's needed and help save more lives in California. So thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General. And I believe that concludes our roundtable.